Legendary Kiss guitarist Ace Frehley has died at the age of 74.
Maybe have innuendos, but you could take it either way. You know, I mean, if you have a deranged mind...
What way did you take it when you wrote?
When the world gathered to say goodbye to Kiss legend Ace Frehley, no one expected what came next. As the final notes faded and the crowd mourned in silence, Peter Criss stepped forward, and what he revealed stunned everyone in the room.
Artists that influenced me as I was growing up as a teenager and learning how to play guitar.
This wasn't just a farewell. It was a revelation that changed everything we thought we knew about Ace Frehley. The final chord. The night was quiet in Morristown studios, broken only by the hum of amplifiers and the faint hiss of a recording mic. Ace Frehley had been there for hours, locked in that familiar trance that only music could bring him. He was 74, but the energy in his fingers and the passion in his heart still belonged to the young man who once made the guitar roar like thunder on Kiss's biggest stages. The room was littered with empty coffee cups, half-eaten snacks, and tangled cables, a typical Frehley workspace. According to his studio technicians, Ace had been pushing himself too hard. They said he often worked for 8 hours straight, stopping only for a sip of strong coffee before diving back into the music. He told them he wanted his new project to prove that he still had the power of his 20s. That night, he was testing a new riff, adjusting the amplifier as he had done thousands of times before. But this time, fate had something different planned. He suddenly lost balance and fell forward, striking his head. At first, no one thought it was serious. He laughed it off and said he was fine. But within hours, his condition worsened. The team rushed him to a nearby medical center, where doctors quickly discovered a brain hemorrhage caused by the fall. They performed emergency surgery that lasted several hours, and for a brief moment, it seemed like he would recover. His family stayed by his bedside, playing his music softly in the background, hoping it would give him strength. Over the next 2 days, his health began to decline rapidly. The doctors explained that the pressure on his brain was worsening and that he might not recover. By mid-October, his loved ones faced an impossible choice. They were advised to prepare for the moment when life support might be his only connection to the world he loved. In the early hours of October 16th, 2025, the monitor beside his bed went still. Ace Frehley, the man who once made the world believe that guitars could breathe fire, was gone. His representative later said in a short statement that Ace passed away peacefully, surrounded by his family and the music he loved. The news broke across the world. Fans mourned, and his old bandmates expressed their grief. Gene Simmons called him a true warrior of the guitar. Paul Stanley said the loss went beyond music, and Peter Criss called him the electric heart of Kiss. The silence that followed was heavier than any note Ace had ever played. His passing left not only a void in rock music, but also a mystery that no one could yet explain. But as mourners gathered for his farewell, something at his funeral would soon shock the entire world. The funeral that shook rock. The morning of the funeral was still and gray, the kind of day when even the sky seemed to grieve. Friends, family, and legendary musicians quietly filled the small memorial hall in Morristown. Ace Frehley had never wanted a grand farewell. He once said that he didn't need a big ceremony, just music. His family respected that wish. There were no flashing lights, no reporters, no loud announcements, only soft guitar instrumentals playing in the background, the sound that defined his life. Every seat in the hall carried memories of him. At the front sat Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley, their eyes hidden behind dark glasses, while Peter Criss kept his head bowed, occasionally wiping away tears. The three remaining members of Kiss had shared more than fame. They had shared fire, chaos, and brotherhood. The loss of the man they called Space Ace was more than the end of a musical era. It was the end of something deeply personal. As the service began, each of them took a moment to speak. Gene called Ace a true warrior of the guitar, his voice trembling slightly as he remembered the wild years of Kiss. Paul said the loss went beyond music, calling Ace the one who gave the band its stage soul. In one corner of the room, Ace's daughter Monique sat quietly, holding a small silver pendant that once belonged to her father. The air was heavy with emotion, but everyone expected the service to end the way it had begun, calmly and respectfully. However, as the final song faded, something unusual happened. A woman, unknown to most of the guests, slowly walked to the podium. Her presence turned every head in the room. She wasn't part of the band, not part of the official program, and not someone anyone seemed to recognize. She carried a small device in her hand and looked nervous but determined. The atmosphere changed instantly. The quiet hum of whispers filled the hall as she cleared her throat and began to speak. She said that she had known Ace for many years, and that there was something he had asked her to share on this day. Her words made even Peter Criss look up in confusion. Then she pressed a button on the device, and a soft sound filled the room. A recording, one that none of them had ever heard before. But as the mysterious recording began to play, what came next would leave everyone in the room completely speechless. The secret recording. The first sound that came from the speakers wasn't what anyone expected. It wasn't a Kiss riff, not the thunder of drums or a wall of electric guitars. It was a gentle acoustic melody, slow, emotional, and haunting. The room fell completely silent. Everyone leaned forward, unsure of what they were hearing. Then came a voice that made hearts stop. It was Ace Frehley's. But he wasn't singing. He was speaking. His tone was calm, filled with warmth and reflection. "This is for the only person who understands me outside of music," he said. Those words echoed through the hall like a whisper from beyond the grave. Some of the guests exchanged glances, wondering who that message was meant for. Others just closed their eyes and listened, realizing they were hearing something private, something Ace never intended for the stage. The woman at the podium kept her head lowered. She explained softly that this recording was not part of any official album. Ace had mixed it himself using old analog equipment, away from the record labels, away from the pressures of fame. He had told her that, when the time came, she should let it play. And that moment, she said, was now. The melody carried the unmistakable touch of Ace. Clean, simple guitar notes, layered with emotion rather than technique. It felt raw, real, and deeply human. Some guests wiped away tears. Peter Criss sat frozen, his hands clenched, his face pale. To him, Ace's voice was both comfort and pain, a reminder of the brotherhood they once shared. As the recording continued, there were no effects, no backing vocals, no heavy drums, just a man, his guitar, and his thoughts. The song ended with a brief silence, then one final sentence. Ace's voice returned, softer this time, as if he was leaning close to the microphone. "If you're hearing this," he said, "you already know the truth." A shiver went through the room. What truth was he talking about? The woman said that Ace recorded this piece during a sleepless night after he refused to return to the stage with his old band. He had told her he needed to create something personal, something that belonged only to him. But when the woman finally revealed who she was, and what her connection to Ace had been, The entire meaning of that message changed in an instant. The woman behind the legend. The woman took a deep breath as the final note of the recording faded into silence. All eyes were fixed on her, but she didn't flinch. She said quietly that she and Ace had shared something far more personal than the world ever knew. Her name wasn't immediately recognized by many in the room, but her words carried a sincerity that silenced even the faintest whisper. She explained that she and Ace had lived together for several years in the suburbs of Los Angeles. It was during the time when he had just left Kiss, and she had stepped away from acting. They met, she said, through a mutual friend who owned a small private recording studio. What began as casual meetings over coffee and music soon grew into something deeper. The two shared a private world away from fame. They would meet at night, write music together, and spend hours listening to old tapes. She said that Ace was happiest when no one expected anything from him, when he could just play his guitar in peace. During those years, they never went public, never appeared together in photographs, and never mentioned each other to the media. "We didn't need to," she said softly. "Music was how we spoke." She explained that the recording everyone had just heard was made one sleepless night in that same small studio. Ace had told her that he wanted to create something pure, untouched by commercial hands. He wanted to capture what it meant to play without fear, without deadlines, without expectations. When he finished mixing it, he handed her the tape and told her to keep it safe. "When the time comes," he had told her, "let it play." Her voice broke as she said she had kept that promise. She had carried the recording for decades, never releasing it or mentioning it to anyone, not even his closest friends. She said it was his final request, and she knew this was the moment to honor it. And when Peter Criss heard what that secret project truly was, he stood frozen, realizing that Ace had planned one final surprise for the world. Peter Criss's powerful farewell. After the woman's revelation, the hall felt heavy with disbelief. Some guests lowered their heads while others stared at Peter Criss, who remained silent. He had been Ace's friend since the early days, long before the fame, the tours, and the silver-painted faces. Theirs was a brotherhood forged not by contracts, but by chaos, laughter, and the shared dream of conquering the world through rock. When Peter finally stood to speak, the room quieted again. He placed his trembling hands on the podium and looked at the photograph of Ace beside the coffin. His voice cracked at first, but then it grew steady. He said that Ace wasn't just a guitarist. He was the spirit that turned their music into magic. He told the mourners that Ace could take a single note and make it sound like a whole universe. "He was the electric heart of Kiss," Peter said, his voice filled with emotion. He reminded everyone that Ace was the one who brought danger and life to their performances, the spark that lit up every stage they walked on. As he spoke, Peter seemed to travel back in time. He talked about the smoky clubs in New York where they first played, the long nights on the road when they had little money but endless dreams, and the moments when they laughed until sunrise after yet another wild concert. He said that Ace's laughter was something he would never forget. It was loud, contagious, and full of mischief. He was unpredictable, Peter said, but that was what made him Ace. Then, after a long pause, Peter took a deep breath and added something that caught everyone off guard. He revealed that Ace had been working on something before he died, a new collection of songs he never spoke about publicly. Peter said that a few weeks before the accident, Ace had called him late at night. They had talked for hours about music, life, and how tired Ace had been feeling. During that call, Ace told him that he was working on a piece that would show his fans who he truly was beneath the makeup and the fame. Peter had thought it was just another idea, another late-night burst of inspiration. But now, standing beside his coffin, he realized Ace had been preparing something far greater. Peter wiped his eyes and smiled faintly. He said Ace never chased trends or fame. He only chased truth in sound. As he stepped away from the podium, he whispered, "You did it, brother. You really did." The crowd erupted in gentle applause, but beneath their admiration lingered a burning question. What was the project Ace had spoken of? What had he been creating in those final days that no one else knew about? The hidden album. Goldie Star. After the funeral, Ace Frehley's family and team began going through his home studio, a sacred place where chaos and genius lived side by side. The room smelled of old vinyl and burnt coffee, with guitars still resting against the walls, cables snaking across the floor, and notebooks filled with scribbled lyrics stacked in uneven piles. His daughter Monique, along with his longtime sound engineer, began cataloging everything for his estate. That's when they found a sealed black case labeled in Ace's handwriting, Goldie Star. No one had ever heard of it before. It wasn't mentioned in his interviews, not even in the notes for his last album, 10,000 Volts, which had been released in early 2024. Inside the case were several tapes, handwritten sheets of music, and a letter dated a few months before his death. The letter said that Goldie Star was something he had worked on entirely alone. He described it as a final experiment, a sound that captured the feeling of freedom he had chased all his life. The engineers transferred the tapes to digital format, expecting rough demos or half-finished riffs. Instead, they found something entirely different. Each track was beautifully structured, almost cinematic. The melodies were stripped down to their bare essence, with acoustic strings, soft reverb, and quiet hums that felt like breathing. But the real surprise came when they listened closely. Hidden beneath the main tracks were faint whispers. Ace's voice speaking lines that sounded more like reflections than lyrics. One engineer said he could hear Ace murmuring phrases about love, mistakes, and the fear of fading away. Another claimed that at the end of the final track, Ace's voice said softly, "If you're hearing this, I've made peace with it all." It was as if he had left behind a musical letter to the world, a farewell disguised as an unfinished album. Experts who analyzed the composition said the tone reminded them of Frehley's Comet, nostalgic yet deeply introspective. Unlike his earlier work, Goldie Star had no pyrotechnics, no electric solos, no chaos. It was pure Ace, honest, tired, and at peace. Some speculated that the title symbolized his persona, the spaceman, finally finding his place among the stars. Peter Criss, when told about the discovery, reportedly went silent for several minutes before saying that Ace had always talked about leaving something real behind. He didn't want to be remembered as a character, Peter said. He wanted to be remembered as a man. But when engineers listened to the final track again, they discovered a faint sound buried deep within, a hidden message from Ace Frehley himself that would send chills down their spines. The eternal legacy. When the engineers played the last track of Goldie Star one more time, they decided to isolate the background sounds to better understand the faint whispers. As they filtered the noise and amplified the final seconds, something remarkable emerged. Beneath the gentle hum of the guitar, Ace's voice could be heard once more. It was quiet, almost ghostly, as if he were speaking from another world. "If you hear this," he said, "remember, freedom was my only stage." The room went silent. Even the engineers, hardened by years in the industry, felt goosebumps. It wasn't just music they were hearing. It was a message from a man who had lived his life chasing artistic truth. Ace Frehley's journey had always been a fight between fame and freedom. From the very beginning, he refused to bend to commercial pressure. When record labels wanted radio-friendly hits, he delivered raw, guitar-driven soundscapes that captured emotion rather than perfection. His riffs in songs like Cold Gin and Shock Me weren't technically complex, but they carried feeling, something no machine could replicate. Dave Grohl once said that seeing Ace perform with smoke and light bursting from his guitar was one of the moments that made him want to be a musician. Lady Gaga had also mentioned that the spaceman character inspired her to embrace confidence and individuality on stage. Ace's influence was enormous, even if he didn't always get the credit he deserved. His guitar style was often studied in music schools as an example of how simplicity could create lasting impact. Instructors pointed out how Ace used silence as much as sound, giving each note room to breathe. His legacy lived on, not only through his fans, but through the many artists who called him their inspiration. Tom Morello once said that Ace taught him that one perfectly placed note could mean more than 1,000 complicated ones. Ace Frehley's life was not perfect. He faced personal battles, addiction, and disagreements, but he never lost himself to them. His daughter Monique, now the guardian of his archives, promised to preserve his music exactly as he left it. The guitars, the tapes, the memories, all remain untouched. A frozen moment of brilliance. What do you think Ace Frehley's greatest legacy truly is? Share your thoughts in the comments below.